Peace, peace, everybody. So, welcome everyone to hop on board onto this particular live for the Soul Soul discussions. I will go ahead and let YouTube do what it do to reach out and touch somebody. But in the meanwhile, I'll go ahead and lay the basic groundwork in terms of what I'm going to be covering today. I'm going to be tapping into talking about um, the shadow and the dark psychology as it pertains to relationships, basically as an influencing factor. Because the reality is that no relationship is really exempt from the shadow expressions or the dark expressions from the psychological or the energetic aspect of us. Um, but due to the differences in us, of course, there is some relationships compared to others deal with the shadow and the dark psychology more towards others. There are relationships where that's not a major influencing factor in the relationship. And there's several reasons for that. I know just if we kind of follow certain narratives through certain outlets where we get our information from, we, we're very easily convinced that all relationships are going to have high regards of a dark or shadow expressions as a normacy. I want to draw a distinction is that in a relationship you can experience expressions from the shadow, expressions from the dark psychological aspect of people, but it doesn't mean that it's consistent. It just means there's certain moments where those things will come up depending on the situation, scenarios, or the pressure or the challenge that might be facing, or the desire that someone's trying to pursue. But it doesn't mean that it's part of the relationship identity. Um, but in retrospect, there are relationships whose identity almost embodies strongly uh, those characteristics. So let me know if you can hear me, if everything is clear on your end, because everything is clear to me, but I don't know. So definitely let me know. Okay. And so again, so some of you are just okay. You can hear me. Okay, great, great. Okay, so we're going to get into talking about the shadow and the dark psychic or mental or energetic forces that is present in relationships that operates. Now, I will let you know I'm not going to dive too deep into it because I'm basically just going to kind of get us to alert us about this. And then if you desire to go deeper, I invite you to really join our Soul House because on the 21st of this month, June 21st, we're going to go really into it. It's going to be a series, and we're going to go really into this because one thing that I um, understand is that a lot of us are facing these experiences in our relationships, and sometimes some of us are struggling to identify it before it becomes an issue, right? It's one thing when you're already experiencing it's already full-fledged and it's operating. But how about those that really like, let me get understanding about shadow and dark psychology so that way I can manage, avoid, or uh, rectify, or just anticipate, discern, whatever you need to do. I get it, so like I don't think there's a lot of tools. Relationships so funny because when we think about our professional careers or certain things of certain pursuits requires skill sets and a way of to know we have a certain skill set and level of competency to be able to carry out a task or be able to function in a certain manner. When it comes to relationships, that's we kind of just go in mostly by instinct. And one of the main skills that we lack is psychological insight, behavioral insight, understand behavioral determinants about ourselves and about each other, or about the combination when we really come together. So this is one of the things that what I love about the Living Soul Numerical System that I advocate and come from and teach from is because it helps bring that stuff to light. It helps give you that understanding. So I like to term it as spiritual psychology. So it almost like it introduces you into spiritual psychology but it has a very practical and a very measurable outcomes that you can really see the things really playing out. Okay, and so that's some of the things I do. The training, but we also have we're building a whole community. So if you want to join us on Facebook, we have a Soul Haven house. You kind of go in there and get some basic info, but also you want to kind of get immersed, and just get a regular orientation. Join me inside the Soul House, or also join my Patreon. But inside the Soul House, you're going to get more of the, eventually more of the detail, and there's going to be certain exclusive information, of course, that's inside the house if you want to build that aspect of yourself. So appreciate everybody joining on. So let's go ahead and share this. So what we're going to do is I'm focusing on the shadow and dark psychology as an influence inside of relationships. So I'm not quite sure we all could think about when we got a little bit of season up under us. It seemed like you've ever been in a relationship, and it seemed like that it's like you're playing cat and mouse with each other's emotions. It seemed like everything is tick for tack, or it seems like you go through these waves where something that y'all agreed upon that's understood, but all of a sudden it seemed like it goes south. We all have probably dealt with some relationships where it seemed like someone just becomes extremely self-serving, right? We have probably experienced relationships where we have seen manipulation at all times high, And so this is why I want to draw a distinction, but also bring in a merger between the shadow psychology and the dark psychology, because they can kind of be intertwined in each other, and a lot of cases, one precedes the other. Okay. Now I'm coming from a metaphysical point of view. I'm a metaphysician, so I'm not coming from a clinical, psychological field. I respect the field, so I'm not coming from that. So I'm not doing any diagnosis or anything like that. I'm just breaking down things from a spiritual point of view, metaphysical point of view, how it plays along with the forces and energies of life, and I'm just breaking down and translating it into conceptual forms for us to really begin to understand. But again, I also advocate a system that helps you understand all that through the Living Soul numerology system. So it also gives you details and insights about behavioral determining, how to profile individuals, how to also detect shadows, and things like that. So that's what I really do. It's something that's kind of just getting new with this. So the shadow is basically, picture like the shade. That's this aspect of us that we might want to mask about ourselves. These might be repressed potential, right? We might have certain potential. Here you go. You ever recognize individuals that you see all the potential in them? They even show flashes, and it gives you evidence that the potential is there and that they actually can carry it out, but it seemed like they just never walk into that potential. If you recognize that, that's a signal that someone's operating probably more in their shadows. So the shadow part is that it's repressed. It's not free flowing in them to operate in that. It could be a variety of different reasons why you have that repression there, but we recognize it. So that's how you know, like, oh, they're operating in shadow. Like, daggone, why you keep operating here? You should be here, steady here. It's probably the shadow. They probably have yielded to the shadow. Now, there's different things that we can look at when we do, when we do your soul profile and start learning about your soul codes, is that it can kind of give us an indication, where is it coming from, where is it at, what you might need to work through, in order to shift out of that repression. Okay. And so, for example, when I'm talking about the Living Soul numerology system, when I'm talking about your soul codes, there's certain numerical assignments to you based upon your date of birth, but there's other numbers that's playing inside in terms of the shaping of your soul and the interactions of daily life, and also the placements of energetic forces that you coincide with. And so when all that's kind of going on, not to get technical, when all that's going on, it gives us indicators, it gives us proximate understanding of what, in high likelihood or a probability, that you respond a certain way, react a certain way, or draw things to you, might avoid certain things, and so forth. So to cut through all that I just said, one thing to look at people's soul profile is that it is very, we call the inner war versus the inner peace in us. Some of us doesn't, based on our numbers, don't really have the inner war, okay? And some of us do have the inner war. So we look at the relationship between the inner war and inner peace and which one's is stronger. So just for clarity, so if someone say they when we look at it, when we assess it, if someone has like 0 to like 35% showing things of shadow, right? Some of the shade or in them, we look at that and we be like, okay, that's a manageable shadow. So what that means is that depending on situations, there are times where you'll see they'll kind of dip into the shadow expression and bring it out more than it needs to be. But they can self-manage them, or they can self-regulate it. They know how to pull it back together if they shift into that space. Then when we get above that percent, when we get to like, what I say, like 36 to 45%, we acknowledge it as an active shadow. So which means is that um, it's not a shock to see this individual or people or in a setting where you'll see the shadow expressions having a little more liberty, and you see less inclination to rein it in, to self-check it, or to regulate it. Okay. And so then when we talk about 46 or above, we're talking about someone that's probably going to show early signs or really operating in the dark psychology of things. And so this is why I said that one thing kind of proceeds into the other. We look at the shadow, because the shadow is not necessarily negative. It could be the potential, it could be your desires, it could be your instinct, but also it could be your unacceptable behavior. It could be your also the housing of your ulterior motives, right? It also could be your unmet needs. If you think about it, so if you keep experiencing unmet needs, you keep experiencing your desires not being honored, you keep experiencing situation that got you pulling you out of character, that is high likelihood, depending on the individual, that can pull you more into the shadow, of course. But if you stay in that space, it'll shift you more into the dark psychology of yourself. So this is why sometimes we see this stuff happen inside relationships, because relationships, because it's very intimate, it's very close. You're dealing with someone day in, day out, or you deal with them often, very often, to the point where y'all's presence and y'all's energetics merges and has a point where it has strength to influence each other. And so because of that, it can really bring out certain things out of us that we know was there, or it can also bring the beauty. It could bring out the ugly or the beauty. We all know that. And so, but when someone is operating in their shadow is getting pressure, when that shadow is getting pressure, it can shift into almost another level, into the dark psychology, where you start seeing people are more favoring coercion, manipulation, trying to control, and those type of aspects, right? And so that's why I want to kind of just draw a little distinction. Just treat this like kind of like an introduction into somebody just hopped on what I'm going to be talking about in the whole series of the shadow psychology series that I'll be doing, because we need to understand these insights. But what I'm going to do is really give you the basic practical basics, so that way going forward you have a skill, you have an awareness, you have an insight to recognize these things being at play. Okay. Now, so the shadow can lead people over into the dark, and I'm coming from the metaphysical point of view. Yeah, I've seen it. I sit down and done many different reports with people, and look at couples, and I can see it. So if someone really scores in their inner war inside themselves, and they're really at a 46, showing at a 46%, does it mean that there's doom and gloom? No, it just means that there needs to be an awareness of yourself. And the question becomes now, are you willing to acknowledge it? Are you willing to regulate? Do you understand what might shift you to operate in those tendencies, right? And do you understand what you're projecting onto others? Because what you're projecting from others, you generate a response, whether you know it unconsciously. So unconscious behavior refers to the shadow, but the unconscious behavior can be very ugly. And if it's strong enough, it can begin to exude dark psychology. Okay, so this is why I say the shadow and the dark psychology works kind of simultaneous with each other. Okay, so ideally you want to bring in the awareness. Some of the popular terms we hear when people talk about narcissism and Machiavellianism and some of these other different these real personality expressions, it all comes from the aspect of trying to gain power, lack of self-awareness. So there's certain common themes behind it all that allows those things to exist. And so that's some of the things I want to invite y'all to really join the Soul House, so you can begin to understand those things from a very easy space without sounding too clinical about it. Okay, so when we talk about the shadow, we're talking about the repressed, the untapped potential. We're talking about the persona contrast. You ever seen some people is like, and we all been guilty of it, say you was brought up in a certain family, and you was encouraged to operate and do a certain way, and you bought into it. That is the persona contrast, because then as you get older, you start to realize certain things. You start to have more of an inner of awareness about yourself. You start to realize, like, I don't identify with these things that I'm operating right now. I never have. At that moment, you are facing the shadow, and at that moment, you are now creating a disruption inside yourself. And typically, so one of the basic battles with the shadow of ourselves is the persona contrast versus our true self. And so inside relationships, we talk about the shadow aspect, there's a dance, there's a battle that goes on between the persona contrast, or we'll say the false self versus the true self, depending wherever, wherever it's, it's highlighting the same, concept. So this persona contrast that you might have borrowed, or you could borrow persona contrast because, say, you're trying to get certain jobs. So you take on a certain persona and you bring the shade of what you really are interested in, what you really are, so that way you can what? Operate in a certain privilege or have certain access to certain things. We all been guilty of that. We all, so I'm not really judging it. I'm just breaking down how the shadow exists, how the shadow forms, and how the shadow is encouraged and how we get into it. And that's why you see, so and a lot of times, especially, if you work long enough in the job market in corporate, you see a lot of that. That's why sometimes in some work environments, it's very exhausting for people because you don't know where the authentic people are at because everybody is wearing a mask. So what happens inside relationships is when you spend long enough time, and I'm gonna talk about this in another live. I'm talking about the transitions inside relationships, or like someone I'm very close to, like a friend called Nicole. She calls them solar eclipse. And so there's solar eclipse that happens inside relationships. It happens inside ourselves at certain periods of time. That really is about a transition. A lot of times, the main effect from that is facing the mask. Do you still want to keep wearing the mask? You got these outcomes happening. It does. You don't match with it. You're frustrated, right? You feel like this is not me, but I still got to do this because of these obligations or so forth. You're wrestling with a shadow, okay? And don't beat yourself up with it. It's just that, unfortunately, when you think about the spiritual side of things, when we are operating inside the matrix, right? We operate inside the world. We have borrowed certain things to navigate it. And that's why in the spiritual scriptures, a lot of times it talks about don't be conformed to the world. In other words, don't fashion yourself at the methods, the culture. Recognize it because you have to live in it, but you don't have to become it. But unfortunately, a lot of us become different aspects of what the projection is coming from the world systems. And so when that's happening is we take on identities and we start to defend those identities because it's a part of our being able to function, part of our roles, becomes part of our identity. We don't want to strip it. So when you start to go through this phase of recognizing the persona contrast versus your true self, you start trying to demask from the conformities that you have with the systems of the world. And so we talk about the term matrix. Matrix is talking about a mold. It's a mold that convinces to believe one thing when it actually is not. So we can think about there's a mold, there's a matrix for in the healthcare stuff. It got you thinking one thing, then it's not. You realize like, well, you said this, do this, and it brings this about for my health. But I realized is when I did these things, it didn't do that. Exactly. There's a religion matrix, right? There's the education matrix. There's a governmental matrix. There's all kind of different kind of matrix that operates in. The primary focus is when it's coming from the world system. It's got you convinced of one thing. It's able to convince you for something to be one thing that is actually not. But you actually take what's not and treat it as it is. Okay, and so when you start to fall into that, typically that hooks the shadow, that grows the shadow, and it can easily shift people into dark psychology is because I'm trying to defend this shadow, but now I'm in a pursuit to defend it, then I'm willing to operate in the darkness of it to regain control or to protect from threats and all these different things. And it's all being built around the false self. It's all being built around the persona contrast of you. It's not even about the true self of you. Okay? And so this is going on. So let me pull this back a little bit so I start drifting in that direction like that. So when we talk about relationships, there is this tango, this dance between the persona contrast and your true self. Also, there's a dance between the repressed self and also you having permission to be you. In other words, to have your autonomy. How many times you been inside relationships and you realize I'm not able to be myself? It feel like I'm being kind of indirectly nudged to be something for them that I'm really not. Shadow. Now, if that keeps happening, that can easily shift over into what? The dark shadow. I mean, to the dark psychology. And that would translate as control. Okay? So that's why I said this stuff works simultaneously. And so, but all this is going on inside relationships, all influencing it. So the thing comes down to like how you dance in between it, right? We talk about untapped potential. It's another big thing as well too, is because relationships should grow you and I. It should not cap us. A lot of us been inside relationships and we experience a capping. It just puts a lid on who we are, and we start to. This is why you hear people when they get divorced, or you hear certain expressions saying, "I lost myself," or feel like they're talking about their untapped potential. They never was able to get to that space of actualization. So it's another. So there's a dance and a battle inside relationships between you moving, you being able to operate in the realized potential versus the untapped potential. Okay, and so when that wrestling is going on right there, we know that's a shadow war. That's a shadow battle. Okay, so when you're dealing with repression versus a self-autonomy, shadow war. We're talking about the we're talking about untapped potential versus realized potential, shadow war. Well, I was talking a little bit earlier, we were talking about the persona contrast versus the true self. That's a shadow war. Okay, then we talk about the unconscious aspect of ourselves, that we're self-aware but we're projecting. Okay, there's a battle between knowing that versus being conscious. So am I self-aware of myself? For example, so think about it. How many people you'll be around? It's actually one of my pet peeves. You'll be around people and they recognize something that you might be unconscious of, but it could be detrimental to you. But they'll go ahead and let you walk into a ditch, even though they saw the ditch coming. Right? That's another battle inside relationships. Some people see the unconscious part of you and they will leverage that against you, because then it shifts probably into their dark psychology is, I'll keep control because I know that this is a weakness. I know it's the unconscious part of them that they don't know. One of the things, if you heard some of my, I was doing a little bit of series to talk about love on my Living Soul Discovery podcast on Spotify, I did an episode talking about love protects vulnerabilities. And so when that is not, so when you're with somebody, somebody needs to hear this. If you're with somebody, you've been in relationships, and they don't protect your vulnerabilities, that is letting you know there's a shadow, strong shadow. There's an overly active shadow there. And it's also more likely that you're dealing with dark psychology. Because someone that loves you is not going to willfully be able to see you go derail yourself. Now, one thing if you listen or not, but they see you derail yourself and you omit the information they need to make a clear decision. See, the battle between talking about the shadow and the dark part is, the common aim is going against what? Visibility. So when you're in love or you're operating in love, operating relationships, one of the most primal things we're supposed to provide each other is visibility. Visibility about ourselves, visibility of what's going on, and so forth. And so when we're not doing that, this what gives birth to the shadow psychology and the dark psychology of us, and they become energetic forces inside relationships. And some of us are not equipped because we don't have the skill set and how to manage and navigate through it, how to deal with it until it just full-fledged operate, and now we're in a reactive state. Okay, and so this is what we're talking about. This is why we're doing the series. This is why I'm inviting y'all to tap into the series. Okay, so now when we switch over to talking about dark psychology, we're talking about people, how they go after trying to get control, how they exercise manipulation, how they operate in dissuading versus persuasion. Okay, so let me talk about right there. So one aspect of dark psychology is being able to dissuade. In other words, I'm trying to convince you out of information that you should know, right? Versus using persuasion properly. I think because we use I'm playing tricks with that word right there because I think we view persuasion as a bad thing. And it's not. Persuasion is not really a negative expression. So I want to draw the contrast in the context we'll talk right now between dissuading and persuading. And so depending on someone dances with that, it gives you the indication between the dark war, the dark psychological war that's going on inside relationships. Do someone that you with, are Or are they trying to dissuade you out of your potential? So in other words, there's all this indirect conversation to try to make you second guess yourself or make you move in a different direction that is perceived to be a good direction for you. Are they intentionally trying to dissuade you? You might not recognize it, but these are things and clues because that's the form, that's the dark psychology showing itself. They might be doing that because some people fear your growth. Some people fear your exposure. If more people get exposed to you, that person starts to feel some kind of way. So to prevent that, they're already going to do dissuasions, trying to dissuade you. That's dark psychology. Okay? So another thing is the power piece. A lot of times people in relationships, the first thing they're trying to do is trying to figure out how they can leverage power. This is why sometimes people want to ask you to share about your vulnerability, share about your, your family background, all these other different things, not because they really care, but because they're trying to leverage you when they need to use it. You gotta be very careful. This goes on between men and women all the time. All right. And so that power piece, okay. And so there's a battle between me trying to leverage power and operate in selflessness, being able to be altruistic, right? Operating in compassion. When you see someone favoring the other, more than the other, it's your clue that someone's operating in dark psychology or they're highly prone to be entertaining dark psychology. Okay? Because relationships is not about trying to leverage myself against you. I'm not in competition with you. I'm not at war with you. I really should be syncing with you. I should be unifying with you. I should be operating in a harmonious flow with you. I'm not here to seek the war in you. I'm here to seek the peace in you, to help bring about the love that I have inside myself to bring inside you, and you vice versa reciprocating doing that. So we got to get to that. But unfortunately, we know that's not operating all the time. Or it might be operating for a little bit inside a relationship, and all of a sudden it shifts. And normally when you see shifts like that happen, that's to let you realize that someone's probably has some shadow things that got stimulated that you didn't know, and all of a sudden it shifted them into the dark psychology. Okay? So this is why you want to tap into on the 21st, where I start talking about these things, because you'll understand the basic foundations to look at, so that way you can know and get a clue of when someone is trying to play with your soul, basically, okay? And so let me just make this subtle plug real fast. If you are interested in knowing the basics or trying to be able to have your eyes open to dark psychology and the shadows, I encourage you to get my book, Soul Rights, because in Soul Rights, it's going to give you the basic frameworks. And if you plan on attending the shadow psychology series I'll be doing, everyone's going to be encouraged to tap into that book, because that's going to be one of the baselines to help us to discern and to have intelligence to know what's coming at us and to also recognize what's operating. There's always a baseline. And so that's established, and you can just tap and get that book. Actually, if you go on here on my YouTube and go to that bio where that link's at and scroll there, you'll see Soul Rights. Just click it and just hop on. It's a really good book, straightforward. All my books are quick, easy reads, but it's straight to the point, and it gives you a lot of insight. So definitely tap into that. It'll benefit you, okay? So now, when we talk about that dark psychology, we also talk about manipulation. In a lot of us, we know there's all kinds of ways to go about manipulation. So there's a battle between manipulating and transparency. And so, of course, when someone's always trying to shade their motives, or they're always trying to engineer you in things that keep you not aware, that is manipulation, okay? And so when someone's trying to erase the transparency or the visibility, we know that dark psychology is there, okay? So these are some of the things that I want to mention about, but also to encourage us that you don't have to entertain it. You don't have to deal with it. Some people, I know there's like a narrative going around, and it's like there has to be like an acceptance of it. No, it does not. Like I said earlier when I was opening, I know plenty of relationships where they don't even deal and wrestle back and forth with the shadow or the dark psychology. It don't mean that you won't see traits and flashes of it in situations, but it's not part of the relationship persona. It's not part of the energetic culture of the relationship. They're just moments where at certain times they might have to face it. I mean, that's just what it is because we are human, right? But when someone's functioning in that, is what I'm talking about, and operating that, you don't have to deal with that, okay? You don't have to deal with that at all. There's nothing inside, relationships is really the basis of relationships about agreeing. How often do we agree, then disagree? How often do we harmonize? So we got to get back to the basics. And I've really been on this whole thing, this kind of this personal campaign. Just let's get back to the basics. Let's stop complicating things that don't need to be complicated, because it's allowing a lot of room for the things we're talking about right now, this dark and the shadow psychology, to begin to take precedence inside relationships. And depending on what you entertain information-wise, you start to think that most relationships are operating more on the dark side of things than the light side of things. And so to help you to not succumb to that, we're here to stand in the middle to help you get insight and understanding, to understand what's operating in comparison in relation to you. And that's where the soul rights come into play. Because when you start to know what your soul rights is, it quickly open up your recognition to what's going on. For example, if someone's going against your sense of hope, then that's a quick cue to let you know, hey, there's a contra intention going on because they're trying to go against my hope. Is it consistent enough where it's a shadow? Is it an active shadow, or is it a dark psychology that's coming at me? Okay, and so these are things that's like an example to look at. For example, your sense of self-love. Is someone coming at and making you feel guilty about your self-love? Is it done consistently? If it's done consistently, then we know that there's a likelihood, there's a shadow there. Now we start looking at is, are they trying to convince you and engineer you to be dependent upon them, or to always feel like they're superior than you? That's the dark psychology. And so these things kind of just happen very often until someone brings the information to highlight it for us to be, for we can get an understanding about it. So that's what. So I want to just talk about that because it's highly important for us to have this awareness and also to develop the skill to discern it. So I'll touch back down, but again, let me say, everyone that's inside the Soul House, there has been several emails going out. Please check your promotion section or your spam section, because you might not be, it's going out, but it might be getting filtered into those, so you're probably missing a lot of different communications that's going on. Also, those of you that's been chiming in, I'm in the planning stages to kick off the Soul to Soul tour. We're going to be talking around the See Your Lover, and that tour is going to be going around to help bring us back together, to help us see each other. This is one reason why I'm talking about the dark psychology and the shadow psychology, is because we have to target some things that's getting in the way from seeing us. So if you're going to be interested in that, when I come to your city, as there's going to be small intimate groups and interactive discussions and stuff like that, we're going to be talking about these dark psychologists where it's necessary. Okay, just go to, matter of fact, better yet, just text my number 1-844-5-WISDOM, and my team will, you just request to be on the email. We'll get you on the email list. And also, if you're interested in joining the Soul House, we'll give you that link for that. Or you can go to my YouTube bio link and click where it says email, and just click that and subscribe to the email list, so that way you can get the alerts and everything, okay? So I appreciate everybody's been supporting, appreciate everybody's inside the Soul House, appreciate everybody's going to be coming into the Soul House, appreciate everybody's going to be attending on June 21st, dealing with the shadow psychology of the soul. Everyone's welcome. I appreciate everybody on. I will be back on again, but until the meantime, y'all be up. One love. Oh, hold on. Someone said something. Yes, the best relationship is when the shadow is understood. Absolutely. 100. All right, so that's what's up. We're going to touch back down. Hey, the replay will be available, and probably after a while, I'll be inside the Soul House. So just tap in. One love.